All right, you have 10 years to make $10 million. What do you do? How do you do it? I'm gonna go through what I would do if I had to make $10 million in 10 years. There's a few different paths that I could possibly take. And keep in mind, my background is in technology. So I'm a product designer. So I design apps and websites and stuff. And I've worked with several startups. I know nothing about real estate. I know nothing about drilling for oil. So the way I see it, I would have 3 to 4 possible paths to make this happen. All right, the first path, and definitely the worst of all of these, is I would increase my income and then invest in things like the stock market. And I think my best shot at like increasing my income the most would be to do consulting services. So I'm a product designer, like I said, and there's this product designer named Brett Williams. I've talked about him in other videos of mine. So he does consulting for several different businesses at a time, making over $1 million a year. So I'm gonna go with that scenario. If I was making $1 million a year doing what this guy does, and I was investing my extra money, how much would I have to invest to get to $10 million in 10 years? I made a video a while back about why I stopped working 2 remote jobs at the same time. And in that video, I said, I quit working 2 jobs because it's a bad way to make money, or rather it's a bad way to build wealth. I mean, it's a pretty good way to make money. Like you can get your income pretty high, but as far as building wealth, it's incredibly hard. But people in the comments disagreed. They said you could most definitely get wealthy by working 2 remote jobs and then investing in different things. So I'm putting that to the test. We're gonna break down the numbers. My dad is a financial advisor, so he has walked me through this future value function or equation where you can plug in the different numbers of how much you're going to invest every month, for how many years, and then what the rate of return is, and then it'll spit out how much you would make at the end of it. So people like to do this for their retirement where they say, I'm going to invest X amount, and then by the time I'm 59 and a half, if you're investing in like a Roth IRA, I'm gonna pull all that money out and it's gonna be worth $2 million. So I'm gonna plug in the numbers just to show you how much you would have to be investing to make $10 million in 10 years. So the initial account value we're gonna say is 0. The rate of return, so 7% is what he's saying is typical when he's doing this like financial forecasting for his clients. You could put this as high as like 10%. I doubt anyone would say like 15% for forecasting. That would be like incredibly high, but it is possible, I guess, to get that high. But we're gonna stick with 7%, just because that's what a professional financial advisor would actually do in forecasting these types of things. So we're gonna say 10 years. And right now I've got monthly investment set at $150. So if you invested $150 per month for 10 years at a 7% return, then your future value is going to be $25,962. But we need that to be 10 million. So $150 a month isn't going to be enough. So in my case, if I were to start doing this design contracting, like this Design Joy guy, and I was making $1 million a year, I would probably pay about $300,000 in taxes. So that leaves me $700,000 a year, $58,333.33 per month. My wife and I have broken down our monthly spending, and we could survive off of $6,000 a month. That would be cutting back on a lot of stuff. So cutting back on eating out, on shopping, on travel, but $6,000 a month would probably be doable for us. So if I could do that, like live how I'm living now, but making $1 million a year, and I could maintain that for 10 years, that's freaking impossible. But just to look at the numbers, let's say that I'm able to do that. I would be investing about $52,000 a month, which would get me pretty close to that $10 million in 10 years. Now, actually try to imagine you are in that scenario. You're making $1 million a year and you're living off of $6,000 a month. You look at your accounts and you have $1.3 million. You're making almost 100 grand a month. Are you really going to be able to resist buying that new car, or going on that trip, or upgrading your house, or spending a little bit more on clothes for 10 years, for a decade? Are you going to be able to resist the spending? Probably not. And especially not if you're married with kids. The temptation to upgrade your life, the temptation to kind of dig in, to say that's enough, is going to be too strong. And then over a prolonged period. So I worked 2 full-time remote jobs at the same time for 8 months, and it wore me down. Like, it was not easy. It was very hard. My mental health was not okay. My friends and family relationships suffered just because I didn't have enough time. I was like working all the time, and that was to make $260,000. I know for a fact that I would not be able to maintain that kind of a rigorous work schedule if I had that much money put away. Actually, let's go back here. I actually want to see, so what about 20 years? Okay, what if you were able to invest, let's say you're investing half of that money for twice as long. So it was 52,000, we'll just say 26,000 for 20 years. That will get you to the past the $10 million mark. But again, that's so much money to be investing, especially over a prolonged period of time. So that would be $312,000 per year that you're investing. So how much do you have to be making to invest $312,000 per year? A lot, probably. These are the kind of numbers that my dad talks about all the time, which are very realistic, that if you were to invest $4,000 a month for 30 years, then you could end up with, close to $5 million. Or let's say that this goes to, let's say it is 15% and, markets are doing really well. That puts you close to $30 million after 30 years. So this is what a smart financial advisor would tell you to do. And this is very realistic. If you make enough money, you could probably invest $4,000 a month and then just ride it out until you're 60 years old. And that's probably the smart way to go. But we're not interested in 30 years, okay? We're looking at $10 million in 10 years. So this is the worst option to make that kind of money in that short of time. Thinking in like 10-year time horizons, it does seem so short. But 10 years, you get a lot done. This kind of proves the Naval tweet that you are not going to get rich renting out your time. You must own equity, a piece of a business, to gain your financial freedom. Trading hours for dollars is always going to be a bad deal. What we all want is not money, but wealth. Even with an incredibly high income, it's just so hard to build wealth and to not spend that income. The next path that I would look to is to start a startup, a tech startup specifically, but I'll talk about the term startup in a second. Paul Graham, the founder of YC, said, if you want to get rich, how would you do it? I think your best bet would be to start or join a startup. That's been a reliable way to get rich for hundreds of years. The word startup dates back to the 1960s, but what happens is one very similar to the venture-backed trading voyages of the Middle Ages. So real quick, what is a startup? Not every small new business is a startup. A startup is technically a new small business that is solving some hard technology problem that has the potential for hyper growth. Hockey stick growth, as they say. Usually it's like a couple founders get together, they build a product, and then they raise venture money. So they'll go to VCs and they'll raise money to build out their company. The problem with starting a startup is obviously the chances of succeeding are incredibly low. Like the number of startups that actually become like these billion-dollar companies. And if you start a startup, it's probably like a 4 to 10 year commitment where if you're the founder, you're kind of stuck there. You can't really bail if things aren't looking great. But I've always hated the idea of looking at the chances of success. In Ben Horowitz's book about startups, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, he talks about how startups are algebra, it's not statistics. To ignore the odds, even though the odds are all against you, just find a way to win. So starting your own startup is gonna be a journey. It's gonna be incredibly hard. The chances are very low. Dustin Moskowitz, he's the guy that started Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. He's given this talk a couple times where he talks about the reasons that people want to start startups are usually the reasons that you shouldn't start a startup. One of them is that you want flexibility, and he's like, when you start a startup, everyone is your boss and you have no flexibility. But another one of them is that you want to be rich. And he gives this example of starting your own startup versus joining an early stage startup.
So some of you are thinking, sure, it's hard, but you get so much more equity as a founder that it's clearly the only way to make a lot of money. So let's talk about 2 different ways that you might get to a great financial outcome. So story 1, you're the founder. You started a company that does Uber for pet sitting. It's a great idea and you executed it well. So you sell the company at some point for $100 million. And if you've been really successful limiting dilution, your equity might be as high as 10% of the company at that point by the time it becomes liquid. So you're walking away with $10 million. Pretty great outcome. However, I just showed you only a small portion of startups make it that far, so this is the lucky case. And it's actually most likely that you end up with nothing on this path because you just end up shutting down the company for whatever reason. So this is definitely the high risk path. But another way to make a similar amount of money is to join a later stage company and help them scale from, say, 500 million in valuation to 20 billion. So even straight out of college, you can do really well financially by joining a company at that stage. But especially if you have a few years of experience, you're going to get a really good options package, and you're going to have a fairly high salary too. So if you choose well, you can also walk away with $10 million by taking this path. And if you choose really well, and you do find that next Facebook or Google, while it's still not yet a unicorn, you can do extremely well. So the 100th engineer at Facebook had a way better financial outcome than the vast majority of entrepreneurs. And even if you don't find the company that's going to grow this much, you've got a good chance of picking one that's going to grow some. In fact, your equity value is probably already non-zero. So you've got a pretty good chance of having a positive outcome in that situation and maybe a really great outcome.
So obviously in a startup, the founder is going to make a lot more money than any of the other employees in some kind of a liquidity event, if they should IPO or sell or something. But the benefit of being an early employee is that you can vet the company a lot more. You can kind of see how things are going. You can meet the team, kind of get a sense for the enthusiasm, and you can also meet the investors, learn about the competitors. So you can be a lot more careful about committing to the company. Then once you actually started the company, you have a lot more freedom to leave if things aren't going well. If the writing is on the wall that this is not going to be a unicorn company, that your equity is not going to be worth a lot and it's not going to make you rich, then you could leave and go somewhere else. I was looking for some examples I could show of like early employees at startups that made a bunch of money, and I found a few, but it's funny because I just get kind of sad and a little bit mad looking at all these early employees. I'm like, God, so lucky. Like, you were just at the right place at the right time. But I found this article from Hunter Walk. He's a big investor in Silicon Valley. And he said, the wealth ball bounces in really strange ways in tech. Sometimes dumb people get rich. You got to relax about comparing yourself to others and the anger that can occur when someone who you think isn't as talented or hardworking as you just happens to make millions because they were at the right company at the right time. Focus on what you can control. So apparently this is a thing that happens a lot. I found this lady that was an early designer at Facebook. So she was at Stanford and she was part of the Mayfield Fellows program. And this is a program that like Kevin Systrom, the founder of Instagram, was part of this. And the other founder of Instagram, I don't remember his name. And a bunch of other like famous entrepreneurs have gone through this program. So she's at this elite school. She's at Stanford in this elite entrepreneur program where they then place you in an internship in different startups in Silicon Valley. And she happened to be placed at this startup called Facebook. And they had like 100 employees at the time. She had never done any design work in her life. She was actually like, I think she was studying computer science or engineering or something. And so she shows up and gets directed to the design team and says, hey, you can, I don't know, you can work with them for a little bit. So she interns at Facebook and then she just like stays there, collects a bunch of equity, and then makes millions of dollars when they sold. And then of course she turns around and she's selling books and appearing on podcasts. And I'm sure she's great. I haven't looked into any of her stuff, but a lot of times it feels like some of these people are like reading their winning lottery ticket number when they're telling you, you know, what you should be doing. It's like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to go to Stanford. I'm not going to make it into this special program. So what can I actually do? So this early employee at a startup route, I feel like is a pretty high probability path that you could take. I feel like you'd almost have to be like kind of ruthless about like you get into these early companies. If things aren't going well, you're very quick to bounce and you get into another early stage company, try to collect as much equity as you can. And I feel like that could damage the reputation a little bit. Another thing is I think there's like two different ways that you could enter an early stage startup. So like one is like this Facebook design intern. Like you just show up at kind of the bottom level. You're just an individual contributor and you get, you know, probably a tiny bit of equity and you're really hoping that it's like this $1 billion exit. The other side of it would be to enter as like an executive. So entering at the highest level of the organization of like a small startup. I'm definitely like where I'm at, not qualified to enter at that level. If I were to want to go that route, I think I would need experience working at like, you know, one of the FANG companies, like work at Microsoft or Facebook or Google or something like that for a couple of years. Just kind of build up my resume more, definitely more than where it's at now. So Sheryl Sandberg, she worked at Google for like 10 years or something at a very high level. And then she joined Facebook when they had like, I think they were 4 years in, they had like hundreds of employees at the time, but she joined Facebook as an executive. And she was given like a $1.2 million signing bonus and a salary of like $300,000 and something like 1% of the company. And when they IPO'd, Sheryl Sandberg made like $1 billion. So there's definitely a boatload of money to be made as an early employee at a startup. But the challenge is, can you find the one that's actually going to take off, and can you maintain and build your reputation while you look for it? I don't know. Okay, the next possible path I'm just calling a business owner. So this is different from a startup because of, you know, what I said before. This isn't a tech startup. This is a different kind of business. This is like you're selling some kind of product or service. I would clump in here the influencer kind of businesses. So Kylie Jenner's cosmetics company, Kylie Cosmetics. She sold 51% of the company for $600 million. So that's $1 billion business that she created. It's not a tech startup. She built it by building a massive influence, a massive audience, social influence, and then launching a business off of that. Another example that would be like, you know, Beast Burger, The Rock's tequila company, Conor McGregor's Propa 12 whiskey. I would think that if you're starting from zero, in 10 years, you could build a huge audience, a big enough audience to then build a business, kind of launch a business off of that would get you to $10 million. Another thing that I think of in this category is the Alex Hormozi style of business. He built this business called Gym Launch. So he would help gyms get their first customers in the door, and then he would get paid based on the number of people that he could get to sign up. He talks about it in his book, The $100 Million Offer. But the way that he frames building a business just that you're like providing value, solving problems. He makes it seem like very doable that you could build up a $10 million business without needing like millions of dollars of investment from venture capitalists, or without building, a huge team or a huge company. Like if you're not interested in building like the next Facebook, or you're not interested in building a SaaS company, but you want to build a business, you want to make money, he kind of lays out the path of how you could accomplish that. So those are my 3 paths if I had to make $10 million in 10 years. All of these just come down to you must own equity, a piece of a business, if you want to gain your financial freedom. If you want to build true wealth, then you have to own equity. All right, how would you do it? What would be your plan to make $10 million in 10 years? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.